Imelda, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks very much now for agreeing to do Fully Booked with us. We're delighted to have you here.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you need an introduction. Billy Roche, very well known, local Wexford playwright, internationally renowned. I suppose we'll just get started, Billy, will we?
Yes, ready
Yeah.
when you are.
So the first question we have is the book that you most loved as a child.
Well, I opted for Treasure Island,
Mm.
which of course has everything going for it. You know, a young narrator going into an adventure, very dangerous adventure. A kind of a lovable rogue in Long John Silver, and so you know it had darkness and had all different ingredients that a story should have, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, Treasure Island played a big influence on me when I wrote my first book.
Right. Okay.
Davy Wolfe is the Jim Hawkins, and Captain Crunch is the Long John Silver, and
that's Tumbling Down you're talking about, Billy.
that's Tumbling Down, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I never realized that.
Yeah, of course. Captain Crunch didn't have one leg, and you know he wasn't prepared to kill me, but he did his best.
And I just looked up a little bit. That book was published in 1883.
I presume you're not talking about Tumbling Down.
No.
Treasure Island, yeah. One of the original versions had beautiful drawings in it by one of the Wyatts, and that was in I think the museum is in Delaware. I was there, and I did see some of their drawings. There's a family of painters and illustrators, and beautiful artists, the Wyatts, and those drawings helped to popularize the book. But a fabulous book, and brilliant characters and beautiful language all around. You know, of course, Robert Louis Stevenson went on to write Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which you know had influence on everybody as well. You know, we're all the Jekyll and Hyde creatures as we write. You know.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what I have down from my childhood. I wasn't a big reader as a child, but you know, we used to go to the library. Used to take the Diaries, and you know, you'd go to the library, and then it might have been on to the Famous Five or the, you know, some of those books, Nancy Drew and things like that.
Yeah.
But going to the library was an interesting adventure. You know, the silence and the respect that you had to have, and the smell of the musty smell of the books, and the librarian, you know, kind of had one eye. They were a little bit like respectable versions of when you went to the snooker hall and the caretaker was keeping an eye on you. I never became a good snooker player or a good billiard player because I was afraid of my life of the caretaker, who was constantly telling you, you know, if you tear that cloth, it's going to cost £60 or whatever, you know. And so you're always afraid, you know. And so the librarian wasn't quite like that, but you know, there's similarities.
Yeah.
Sorry, Billy. I was just wondering, did you have to pay for the lights back then in the billiard hall as well? We used to have a arcade where I grew up as well. We used to always have to pay for the lights. So whoever lost the game would have to pay for the lights over the pool table.
No, that was no, you got in, and the snooker hall usually had a couple of tables on the outside, and then there was a private room where the privileged hoodlums went, and I never made it into that room. And of course, all that setting gave me a handful of stars. That was the setting, and the whole idea of you know, how do you reach manhood? The manhood seemed to be in behind those doors that you just couldn't get into, you know.
Yeah.
A handful of stars, which originally that setting turned up in Tumbling Down, actually. And as I was writing Tumbling Down, I thought, you know, that'd make a great setting for a play, an old dilapidated snooker hall. And Davy Wolf, the main character of Tumbling Down, is slightly benign kind of a creature. He's gentle, you know. But Jimmy Brady, on the other hand, is a small town rebel. So I kind of flipped the coin a little bit when I tried to write the play, you know. But all of that came from just growing up in this little town, really, you know.
And it's funny how, I don't know, like when you say growing up in a small town, there is sort of certain things that are kind of universal, aren't there?
Absolutely. I mean, when I eventually brought my plays to London, you know, I was sitting there on each of the trilogy in the Bush in particular. Handful of Stars, Poor Beast in the Rain, set in a little baking shop, Belfry set in the belfry of the local church. And on opening night, I got the fears, you know, why would they be bothered with this? Will they get it? But you know, they did get it because it is universal, and you know, the themes are love and death and, you know, betrayal, and they're everywhere.
Yeah, things that are just sort of universal to the human psyche, really, aren't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. And at the time, then I would have been tapping into the Hiberno English that we speak.
Oh, yeah.
I used the word a minute ago, like figere, you know,
Yeah.
sorry, Wexford word. It's actually in the dictionary, figere. It's a little offshoot of vagary.
All right. Yeah.
You did get it right, you know, to know it means what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
And I'm just using it as an example, but the other words too, I can't remember what they were, but I'd be using, and you'd see the little theatre lighting up with those words, you know, little beautiful starry sparks of words that can light up a conversation, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And get down to the colloquial, and I suppose they kind of enrich the characters that are saying them too, don't they?
It says something about the character, yeah. The word, you know, will say something about, and the language that he or she chooses to use is saying something about them. Absolutely, yes.
I think we'll move on to the book you loved most as a teenager now, and it sort of follows on a little bit from what we've been talking about with sort of universality and the human psyche. And it's Catcher in the Rye by Jd Salinger.
Yes, well, you know, Catcher in the Rye is a kind of a typical place for a young reader to start, a teenager to start, isn't it? You can
Yeah,
identify with him and with Holden and his adventures, and it's not written in a particularly uh, grand way, you know. It's written in the language of the boy. You know,
yeah, yeah.
you know, he said he said things like we went into a club and there was jazz and all. You know, he'll use things like and all,
Yeah.
and things that we would have been speaking like that. You know, so and it had all those lovely little things that was certainly influenced me when writing Tumbling Down and writing Through the Eyes of Davy Wolf. You know, the tenderness of a boy growing up, pulling away from his family, from his mother in particular, and you know, reluctantly doing so.
Yeah.
And you know, he was, I mean, he was a rich boy as it turned out, but I suppose it made us appreciate a little bit what we had, because he was locked out of his family.
Yeah, yeah, he was the poor little rich kid, as the say is, wasn't he? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the language in that, as you touched on it there at the beginning, it was very colloquial and very different, I think, is probably, you know, it was the speech of teenage boys and girls, you know, people were phony. The phony is the big thing that comes out of it, isn't it? Oh, he was such a phony. But it was a very fresh voice at the time.
Very fresh voice. And then, of course, we on this side of the water, we were used to New York. We thought we knew New York because we saw it in the films and the cinemas and the stories we read, and it was all quite familiar. So you know, anybody that eventually got to New York, you felt like you knew it because you had been living it all your life, and, through the cinema mainly, and television as well. So he's bringing us down avenues that we kind of knew. One of the first times I went to New York was in the 80s. The Roche band had split up, and I was between two worlds, really. My life as a musician or pop singer, whatever, was over, and I was 31, maybe something like that, and married with 3 children, and wondering what would my next move be. I thought in the meantime I might just take a little trip to New York, and Pierce Turner and Larry Kerwin, of course, were my friends, were out there, and they set me up in a bar out there in the Bronx, and so I went out for a month or whatever and sang in this bar, just to see how it was. But well, I remember I had bought a blazer, kind of a small faces blazer in Carnaby Street, and I really wanted it when I was 17, but I got it when I was 30, and I still have it actually. It doesn't fit me anymore, but it was this beautiful mod blazer, and everywhere I went in New York, people stopped me and admired it, and literally stopped you and say, "Man, cool, that's a cool coat, man." Some people wanted to buy it, that kind of thing. So, yeah, Catcher the Rye comes to mind. As you. And my first night in the bar in the Bronx, this Wexford guy turned up and he said, "So what Roche are you then?" I said, "How do you mean?" And he said, "Well, are you Pierce's son, Martin's son, this one's son?" I said, "I'm Pierce's son." And then he said his name, and his name was Ned Tor. And Ned Tor had been the singer on the Johnny Wreck band when I was a kid. He was my hero. And it was the reason I wanted to be a singer. He was a tough lead singer, a crooner, a beautiful voice. And here he was turning up.
That's amazing, Billy.
Amazing. And shortly after, Ann Pierce and Larry arrived, and Robbie Furlan arrived, who was a fantastic guitar player from Wexford as well. And they all ended up on stage with me, that first night. It was beautiful. But Ned was a real surprise and a boost to me.
Wow, that's amazing. That's fantastic. That's a fantastic story. Your next book is a book that made you laugh, and it's an American book, I think, too, isn't it, Joseph Heller? Catch-22.
Catch-22. I don't know if you know the story, but Joseph Heller, wonderful writer. It's an anti-war book, and the hero is in war, and he wants to go home, but he's flying these missions. And if you fly, let's just say 50 missions, you're allowed to go home, which is a catch-22, because if you fly 50, you have to fly 51. If you fly 51, then you must go and make the 100. So he never gets out. That's the catch-22. And of course, that phrase went down in history now. Catch-22 is everywhere now. So a very funny book, and yes, very serious book.
Yeah.
But there was many funny books. Another book that I read that we all read actually was a book called The Dice Man by Luke Reinhardt. And the character of the Dice Man was this man decided to live his life through the dice, and he would if one comes, I'll go home, and if 2 comes, I won't go home. If 3 comes, I'll have an affair with the woman upstairs. If 5 comes, eventually if 6 comes, I'll kill somebody, and that kind of thing. And it got quite serious as it went along. But he's going to live his life by the die. That's the theory. And we all would have read that. I say we all because our little contingent of people, Jimmy Lacey and people like that, we were guys who probably bailed out of school early, but we educated ourselves, through all these books. And the kind of books that we were reading were kind of pop, beautiful pop American books like On the Road by Jack Kerouac. The Dice Man was in there. Catch-22 was in there. Eventually, I moved on to Henry Miller was in there. So I read all of Henry Miller's books. And one thing was leading to another, but that's where our palette was at that time.
Yeah.
In fairly successful American, slightly commercial books, I suppose.
And a lot of those authors were kind of probably were the bright young things at that time too. They were the new kind of kids on the block as well, weren't they, Billy?
There were, and we were watching out for language was there, beautiful, beautiful language. Henry Miller, beautiful language, and Kerouac. So in my early days of writing, I would have been trying to imitate all those. I would have lots of stuff up in the attic that looked like Jack Kerouac, me going to London or whatever, as just guy out looking for adventures, and you eventually find your own voice. That takes a bit of time.
Yeah.
We were searching for, it's like something like Cool Hand Luke, for example, which was one of my favorites. One of the end sentences of Cool Hand Luke says, sorry, just bear with me for 1 second. Because, not spoiling the frame, I'm sure everyone knows that Cool Hand Luke ends up, like getting the bullet between the eyes. But
I didn't know that, Billy. You spoiled it for me there now.
But when he was gone, the cons missed him, and they said that they heard, sometimes in their dreams, they heard the melody and the hymn known as Cool Hand Luke. And that's a beautiful sentence in the middle of this kind of unknown novel, actually, by a fellow called Don Pierce, who was kind of a little mini Jack Kerouac. But as a writer, that's the kind of sentiment that I'm searching for. The lead character, is a hymn, he's a melody, he's a myth in his own right, or her own right. And that's the kind of language that we were searching for in those books, I think.
That you were sort of trying to chase that language. And just as Thomas says there, I actually didn't realise that was a book, Billy. I just knew that was
as a film. I was saying I didn't know it was a book. I'm definitely going to check that book out, because it's one of my favourite films as well, the bit where he's eating the eggs. He has to eat like 100 eggs or something. It's crazy. But just going back to Catch-22, that is one of the funniest books I've ever read. And like, we're talking about language and stuff in that, but it's more so the way the sentences are structured in that. It's the whole thing where it's a Catch-22, where you have to get out flying a mission, you have to be insane. But to know you're insane means you're no longer insane. And the main character, Yossarian, it's all like that. And there's a character called Major, who becomes a colonel or something. So it's Colonel Major, and it's all just absurd kind of language in it, which really makes that book for me.
Yeah, it's funny just hearing it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just it's straight away. It's like Yossarian, and he's redacting letters to like widows and family that are at home in America. So he's like taking out all the bits of the text, and it's basically all his left. It was "Dear Miss So and So," and the rest is all redacted. And good luck at the end. Like it just starts absurd and gets more absurd as it goes along.
The letters remind me of I read letters from Groucho Marx.
Yeah.
And apparently Warner Brothers were complaining that they were going to make a film. What's just a film? Casablanca. Anyway, something that that was Casablanca came into it, or a place came into it, and Warner Brothers was saying you can't use that name because we have Casablanca already out. And they said, yeah, well, we're letting you away with Brothers. We were brothers long before you were, but you don't hear us complaining about that. And it's real Catch-22 stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose the absurdity of that is the absurdity of war as well, when you kind of pick it all apart as well,
And of course they're only kids, really. Young. Chances of getting home was very slim. He was a pilot, like he was, and chances are he's not going to make it out. Yeah. So behind the laughter there was always
a serious story. Now we move on to Billy. We move on to the book you don't want to admit to reading, which is always an interesting one.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's no book I regret reading, really. And I couldn't really think of one, and a poor old love story came into my mind. About it was essential that we read it at the time, actually, because everyone was reading it. And I don't remember too much about it. Just, I think as we get older, we get more discerning or something. And, I wasn't discerning when I was young. Um, book was there, we read it, or film came on, I went to it. Some better than others, and some caught me better than others. I'm thinking of when I went to see Cool and Luke for the first time, for example. It was in the Cinema Palace. And I came out, and I actually didn't know how I felt or why I felt it, at the time. I didn't have the words to explain it. And so when we read books, I mean, I would have been as affected by love stories as anybody, I probably cried, actually, probably. So, I'm not ashamed of reading any book, really. It's not, it's a bit unfair to say that, but I think it was just a little bit limp, was it? That was a tough question for me, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
Because I've read some terrible stuff. And I've written some terrible stuff. So,
Go on to the book, which is the opposite, which is the book you most often give to others.
well, yeah, I opted for Madame Bovary, actually, which I do give to. Funny enough, I don't give it to men, but then I suppose you would, And I actually have one here, which is a beautiful version of Madame Bovary that I picked up in Red Books, and it's a beautiful edition. So I'm waiting for someone who deserves it, But, I don't know who. But it's beautiful print and it's gorgeous. And I have a good mind to read it again in this particular edition. So I do think maybe a lead actress in one of my plays or something would get that as a present. It's very hard to think of presents when you.
Yeah.
If I ever have another play on stage again, the leading lady. So yeah, I've given that book to a few people. Yeah.
And is there anything in particular about it that moves you, Billy, or what resonates with you about the book?
Well, I suppose that changed my reading habits from what we were talking about before, to the commercial, wonderful commercial stuff to more literary kind of stuff. And that was the beginnings of me beginning to go to Europe, maybe to Chekhov and Flaubert and a little more classical kind of things, And he's a wonderful, wonderful writer, Flaubert. And he took deliberately took a dime store subject, married woman, unhappy in love. Well, it's a love story. He took a love story, and she falls or goes searching for adventure, and I think he was told it would never work as a work of art, and he take this base metal and turn it into gold. He was, and the alchemy of writing, and he did that. So it would have influenced me a lot when I was writing, particularly my short stories.
Yeah.
So there's little touches all over that,
Yeah, yeah. And that you can take something that I think probably at the time that the subject matter was among his circle was seen as sort of trite, but he sort of challenge accepted and went and produced this literary masterpiece out of, I should say, a story that could have been a little bit banal or trite.
So I would have used that as a writer. That's what I do too. Little stories. It worries you as you write it, as you spend a couple of years writing something and wonder, will anybody be interested, really? It's the challenge.
The best book you read in the last 12 months, then that's non-fiction, Billy, isn't it? The Smoking Diaries by Simon Gray.
The Smoking by Simon Gray, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. But I'm rereading it again, and you think you don't go back to read a book because you think, I've already read it. But when you go back, you don't remember anything. You think, did I read this before? And it's only a few years since I read it, but I'm back reading again and really, really enjoying them. you know, he's talking about giving up smoking throughout the whole diary. He never gives it up, and he's a real smoker. He eats that thing. But Simon Gray, when Patty and I went on our honeymoon, we went to London. The first play we went to see was a play called Butley by Simon Gray. We just missed Alan Bates had been playing the part, and I think it was an actor called Alec McGowan, I think, took over from him. He was quite a famous actor as well. So we got to see that while we were there, and it began to open my eyes about. I didn't fully understand the play. You know, it made me think about things, and I would say it's one of the reasons I became a playwright. Probably that experience. You know, I knew I wanted to be something in the arts, a singer, songwriter. I already was an actor. I fancied being an actor. Didn't know how to quite go about it, and a writer would have been too big of a thing to dream of just then. I was only 21, 22. But so that drew me to Simon Gray for, you know, most of my life. And he was great friends with Harold Pinter. Harold Pinter directed a lot of his stuff. Did Harold Pinter direct Butley? He might have, actually. Anyway, we flashed by a few years, and I am an actor. And I'm acting in a play in Hampstead Theatre, Aristocrats by Brian Friel. And it's a huge hit. People are coming to see us, and all kinds of people are coming to see us, you know, actors and writers. But one night I come out, I decide that tonight I will dedicate myself to an ordinary man, an ordinary punter, a woman. That man there, he'll do. And I'll give him my time. So I went to him and said, "How are you doing, sir?" I said, "Grand." I said, "Can I buy you a drink?" And he said, "No, I'll buy you one. Wonderful performance. Thank you." No, thank you. I'll get it. So we took ourselves in the corner and we began to talk about theatre for the next hour and a half, and got nicely, gently mellowed with a few drinks in us. And then I walked him to his car and said good night to him and thanks for coming. And we were going across the road to the Swiss Cottage bar to finish off the night. So the next night I go in and there was a star-studded cast in the Cusack's. Sinead Cusack was the lead actress. Niall Buggy, Peter Caffrey, all, you know, beautiful actors. And they were all just so delighted that Harold Pinter was in the night before and apparently loved the play. And I said, "Harold Pinter was in here last night?" And they were absolutely sick with me because I took him. It was Harold Pinter.
Oh no!
And led him away from them, and he was happy enough with me.
Oh, go away.
And to say that Harold Pinter is a very contrary man, he was beautiful company, and I was the boss, not him, because I didn't know I was Harold Pinter. Yeah.
Oh, that's so fantastic. And if you hadn't known it was him, you wouldn't have spoken to him the way you did at all. Oh, that's fantastic, Billy.
Well, I was laying down the law to him. I was already a playwright who had maybe a handful of stars, was being in the bush, and how I got that part was a handful of stars was in the bush, and an actor had to leave, and I had to step into his place overnight. And while I was in it, I was seen in it and offered this other job. So I went over to my first play for, you know, just to see the play, and for maybe 2 weeks, and I didn't get home for 6 months.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's just one of those beautiful things that happen. But anyway, there was Harold Pinter and Simon Gray. So, you know, the world is all connected.
Gosh, that's fantastic. The next book you can't wait to read is part of that trilogy as well.
Well, yeah, it's the third one. I actually have begun the third one, and it's very funny and very sad, and you know, all of that stuff. He was a chronic alcoholic in his day, and by the time the Smoking Diaries comes around, he's off the drink, and he's always trying to give up the cigarettes, which he never manages to do. But I read it in bed every night, and most nights, one sentence I'll just be laughing. Someone would say, and Patty say, what are you laughing at? And I can't even tell her. Things like, they're probably funny when I tell you, but he says in the old days our houses were freezing. And, we used to wear pajamas, big woolen things, and probably have your shirt on under the pajamas. You'd have a big coat and you'd have a belt around it. He says, wonder we didn't wear our shoes. Little things like that come in. And there was a man, when he went on holidays, this man came in with a bulbous nose that seemed to suggest that he was big red bulbous nose, that he's probably an alcoholic. And if he wasn't an alcoholic, then he should sue his nose.
And then we're on the last question now, Billy. So, and that's the book that changed the way you think.
Well, I think I put Dubliners, did I?
Yeah, Dubliners, yeah.
It actually probably didn't change the way I think, but it probably changed the way I write, though, I think. Also. And again, with these beautiful, beautiful stories that all had a little something hidden inside them. Like I'm trying to think, it's been a while since I read, of course, but a story like Play, for example, where the aunt comes to visit her nephews and nieces, and it's what you call Halloween, and they're playing that game where you three saucers and you put your hand in water, you're going to drown. If you put your hand in another one, you're going to get married, and if you put your hand in the one with ashes in it, you're going to die. And the clay, and she puts her hands in the clay, and hidden in there, although he never says it, is that her death is imminent.
Yeah.
And it's never said. It's implied, and you have to look, and you have to be, So those are the little things that I love, and they're kind of disappearing now because everything is told. That's only one of the things, but there's other little hidden meanings to the stories in there as well. And, so it set me when I write. It is more to the story. I search for more of my own stories more than appears to be there. There'll be a myth of some kind holding and I think it was Yeats said that we all have a myth that's attached to our lives, and if we could find out what it was, we kind of have an idea of what was going to happen to us. But certainly, most artists have a myth that they're unconsciously drawn to. And late in the day, I discovered that mine was probably Dermot and Grania. Because you don't want to know what it is. If you know what it is, But Dermot and Grania haunts my work. The notion that an older, mature you will lose your soul to a younger, prodigal self. Always in the rain, Stephen loses his wife to a younger, wayward guy. The Cavalcaders, Terry loses his wife to his best friend who's slightly wayward. Trojanetti, same thing happens in Trojanetti. And kind of on and on it goes like that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea, really.
Yeah, kind of inherited, kind of continuous story that you keep trying to tell and trying to get right. But there's other myths holding up my plays as well, and they hold it up because you spend a lot of time on a piece, and because it's miniature in size, there's no one climbing Mount Everest in my stories. The notion that there's a myth behind it, there's a scaffolding behind it, holding the story up, keeps me brave, gives me courage to stay with it, and gives it a backbone that you can say, well, this story's been told many, many times before by better people than me, and it works. It will work. It'll be fine, but you just gotta, be brave and stay with the thing, and hopefully see it all the way out.
Yeah.
Don't always make it. Recently I went up into my attic. I'm writing a new play, and you're constantly searching for stuff that I'm perfectly willing to take a play that didn't work and take the exhaust off the engine, take the carburetor out, and take the wheel and use it. And,
Yeah.
so. Well, I've nearly exhausted all the stuff that didn't work now, and I just thought maybe there's one other thing, and I went up in the attic and got it all down. Um, I've written more stuff that never got seen or published than I actually written stuff.
Yeah.
Novels,
Yeah.
the plays that became other things, and
Yeah.
a lot of my short stories and tales from Rainbow Upon began as plays.
Oh,
Sometimes you're writing a thing you don't know, is this the right form it's in,
mm,
There was a short story called Haberdasher. That was a play, and I couldn't make it work as a play, but I was in love with the story, and
yeah.
it found its way into a short story, and a lot of those short stories try to be plays.
Do you find the genre you're drawn to is the play, Billy?
Well, I suppose it's what it's what I'm known for now, and even my prose, can be read out loud, and I'm probably always thinking of, I might have to read this to somebody. How would it be? How would it sound? So that's always there, When my short stories came out, I went on the road with them.
Yeah, I think Haberdashery was one of them, wasn't it? And it was
Maggie Anger were the two main ones, and those were the ones we brought to New York, So thanks to the Wexford Art Centre, Elizabeth, we did a month or 6 weeks or whatever in the Irish Rep out there, and that was beautiful experience. But anyway, we were there one night, and there was a little team of Wexford lads came to see me, and I must have been, I knew they were coming, so I must have been a little bit. So I said to this girl that worked there, I said, one of these nights I'm not going to remember. I'm going to forget something, and there's nobody to prompt me. I wasn't reading it, I had them off by heart. And I said, would you mind just sitting down on the chair in the background and reading it, and, just in case I get stuck. I said, I won't get stuck, because I never did, But if I do, I'll say a line, and you give me the line. Don't give me the line I just said. Give me the line that comes after it, and keep talking until I interrupt you. But it won't happen, don't worry. Happen? I stepped out onto the stage, and I couldn't remember my own name. Maggie, I said, Maggie Anger, no, anymore. And I said line. The girl hadn't even sat down. And she nearly died because she'd never done before. And she must have thought I was kidding. But I mean, it came to me then, and I went off, So the Wexford lads came along. There was a London lad with them, and he said, that was majestic, mate. We saw you flounder. We saw, mate. And then we saw it home, and then you recovered, and it was majestic. But anyway, they bring me to a bar a few blocks away, and this lady is tagging along behind me. And I turned around and said, you okay? She said, yeah, you might have to come along with you. I said, no. But, we're going drinking, and, I don't know where it's going to lead. I know where they're going. I heard. So I said, I saw you in the audience, and you didn't laugh or smile once during my stories. I didn't, she said. Not to my knowledge, I said, because I could see her clearly. She was in the front row. It's only 50 seated. So she said, oh, there was something I should have laughed at, she said. I said, well, maybe no, maybe not laugh at, but you might have, been amused at. Oh. Could you tell me something I should have been amused at? I said, wordplay? No, she said, in New York, we like it right on the nose. So there was obviously my subtlety.
Subtlety.
Paying. Surrounded by books here, but the White Goddess by Robert Graves is my Bible as a writer. And it led me to things like the Golden Bough, which has all the different myths and stuff in it. I don't know, are you seeing these books with them?
Oh, yeah.
Bough? And that led me to From Ritual to Romance, which was beautiful.
And can you
then
first one,
I moved. to Tennyson's Idyll for the Kings.
Okay.
And that's where the cavalcaders came from Idylls of the Kings. So so I moved on from all those earlier books onto these kind of, what I call my magic books that I'm searching for some kind of backbone or inspiration or whatever,
Yeah.
And in the White Goddess has the theory that unless she is there, there's no point in writing it. The White Goddess must haunt the piece, and no one knows who the White Goddess is, but she's everything. I mean, this is an interesting show because it made me think. I'm long in the tooth now, and I've read a hell of a lot of stuff that goes back a long, long way, and a diverse kind of reading pattern. I must mention, of course, that our Wexford writers like Colin Tobin and John Banville played a big part in my writing, reading as well. I have all their books, and that I think we probably inspired each other to keep going.
Yeah.
As you read about their success or their lack of success and how they weathered the storms that came their way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember John walking up with his sister Vonnie up Main Street, and I met him, and Vonnie has an aside said to me, "We've been in all the bookshops, and none of them have John's books. It's really embarrassing," she said, and that was before the sea. When you wrote the sea, and that changed everything. Because you wouldn't book her. And now you can't walk into a bookshop without seeing his books everywhere.
Yeah.
But they're literally nowhere to be found.
Gosh, hard to believe, isn't it? Yeah.
Hard to believe.
Yeah.
And we were in the library when he came after winning the sea, and remember the first thing he said, "My readership will go on this." So there is nothing like a little bit of commercial success to bit of jam on the bread.
Yeah. I suppose it's a little bit of vindication too, isn't it? After years of hard graft,
It is. A little bit of financial stability helps everybody, Well, I have this lovely memory of, because I was writing for about 7 years before I had anything published or performed. And in that 7 years, I wrote Tumbling Down and A Handful of Stars, and I would have made it probably, starred on a play called Amphibians. But I went to London anyway a few days before Christmas to meet the Bush Theatre. I got a letter one morning from the Royal Court turning down A Handful of Stars. And I thought, this is novel because I didn't even send it to them. So I'm getting turned down from people. And the Abbey had turned me down as well, by the way. But in the afternoon, Patrick Sutton came up to me from, I was with Patrick, he was running the Wexford Arts Centre at the time. And I said, I don't know, I think I'm done, Pat. I'm at the end of my tether. And I showed him the letter and all the rest. I mean, to turn me down, I didn't even ask. So in the afternoon, he came up and he said, the Bush Theatre are looking for you. The same day, I was turned down by the Royal Court and accepted by the Bush on the same day. And they wanted me in London immediately tomorrow morning. And I'm thinking, how do I get the fare? I'm completely broke. And so they said, well, we play for an airfare. Yeah, but I have to pay it up front. So I hadn't got it. So I thought I'll take the boat and charge them for the airfare, But I got to London anyway, and then they wanted me to stay over for a few days. And my brother was over there at the time. I stayed with him. And would I stay and meet the director and talk about things? Because it was going to happen immediately, but never happened. Never happened. But it want to be done right now because the director is available. And so I ring home and say, listen, I won't be home for a few days. I'm going to be here. And Paddy wasn't happy because at this stage, it was stale bread, as the fellow said. And she said, look, I'm not impressed with all this. No, they're going to do the play. And they are going to do the play in January, whatever. Yeah. I'm not impressed. And but the director, I've met him and he's great. And he's very well respected director, but she wasn't impressed, you know. And I said, and they gave me a check for 1,000. She said, no, now I'm impressed.
That's what you should have started with.
And it was interesting, you know, because I came home and then would go up to my office and go to work. I always went in and worked every day, but I heard a little jingle jangle of a saucer and a cup of coffee coming up, heading my way. And I thought, hello, this is novel. This doesn't normally happen. And a biscuit on the novel, and she didn't want me to be disturbed and come on down. She'd stick to the job. So I was kind of a pro overnight. That's the ways of a writer.
Yeah, yeah. Oh. Thanks very much, Billy. That was lovely to have the chat with you, and really enjoyed that. And
Great.
yeah, and hope plenty more reading to be done, and hope plenty more writing to be done as well. So we look forward to seeing the new play or hearing about it.
Yes, indeed. Well, that'll be nice, and hopefully that will come. Maybe, you know, probably not this year. I'd imagine we won't get out of the woods. I don't think so this year. Well, maybe we might, but it's looking more like next year, isn't it? Before we're
yeah. And what stage of writing are you with that now, or at the moment?
Well, I've sent the first draft to them, so
oh, brilliant! Yeah.
Yeah. So we're and they like it, so that's nice. It was a fairly big job, so it's gonna, you know, it's gonna take a bit of doing to do it. So, but in the meantime, this same company has my last play, which got shortchanged. You know, I love that. We were due to tour the country, and the pandemic hit. And,
yeah. Well.
So hopefully that will be resurrected first, and we'll take another trip around the country. You know.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be great if it did. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Lovely to talk to you, Imelda. And
yeah, you too, Billy. And thanks very much. No, that was fantastic. And all the best. And take care.
Lovely. Bye bye.